Welcome back to MycoSpace Trip,
a show all about making the world's first living, breathing, sculptural mushroom grow kits. And I'm your host, Marcel. Welcome aboard the MycoSpace Station.
Hello, my fellow humans.
Welcome back to MycoSpace Trip. We're back at it. We got living crystal mold shells and internal frames printed out right here. And now we have the great pleasure of removing all the 3D supports off them. All the tree supports. All the tree supports. All the tree supports. No, seriously, look at this complex tree support setup going throughout this entire frame. It's gonna take a minute to get all this stuff off, but it must be done. All right, we're gonna get to it. Fits. You always have to be more delicate removing the supports from internal frames, especially frames this thin. You can easily snap a portion of it. So yeah, very carefully, I had to undergo the process of removing every tree support from outside and inside the internal frame structure. Being such a complex model, it of course needed many tree supports to have it print successfully. And in the process, we generate a nice pile of scrap plastic. Thankfully, it's PLA, so it is biodegradable. That took forever, but we did it. We removed all the supports from one of the internal frame sides for living crystal. Let's see if it fits inside this shell. What's the verdict? It fits perfectly. And it's not too tight either. Very nice. That looks insane. Eso está escapado. Wow. I can already tell this one's gonna take another lifetime to clean up, so I'm thinking I'm gonna hop on to Fusion 360 and start working on the next piece, and then attack this at a later time. I'm gonna do an edit here where I'm going like this, and then I'm just like sucking it all in with my hands using my magic powers. We're gonna keep working on our next piece, UFO.
I love your channel.
Back at it, are we? On Fusion 360. I went ahead and already modeled the form of a UFO with a abduction beam extending out from the bottom. The idea here is to make the abduction beam the actual display stand for the fruited UFO sculpture form.
Much later.
Hello. We're back in the 3D shop. Behind me, we got Evan setting up 4 new bamboo printers. Now we actually have a fleet of 3D printers in here. Quality ones, not like these crappy Enders in the corner. So last time I attempted to print an iridescent multicolor filament pot for living crystal. It had a catastrophic failure somewhere at the midpoint, and unfortunately it ate through pretty much my whole spool. So I went ahead, ordered a new one, different brand, but it looks identical. I'm not sure if it's gonna look exactly like this, but we're going to see. So things that need to be done. I'm gonna run another pot base for living crystal. The supports need to come off the other half of the internal frame for living crystal. And we're gonna continue working on the next piece, UFO, and likely the next piece after that. And you'll see very soon what that's gonna be. Let's jump into it. Right here, we're doing our best to add some extra supports where they need to on living crystal's pot base. Yeah. This new multicolor filament looks a lot shinier. With the file slice, we get it printing and then jump right back into modeling our next piece, UFO. So we got the mold shell here, and I'm drawing the magic sigil that becomes the fresh air exchange port. Then, of course, sketching out where the connectors go in the middle point between both mold shells. Ensuring that we've got two perfectly fitting mold shells, both with their own fresh air exchange ports.
The next day.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're back. It's another new night, and we're gonna get right back into packing our next sculptural mold. I'm just about ready to start. Just gonna do some preliminary sanitation preparations, and we can begin taking out the already rubbing alcohol washed mold parts and internal frames. And we got our filter here working real hard to make the air as clean as possible. It's not perfect, but it helps reduce the risk of contamination by a lot. So let's get right into it, huh? Bada bing, bada boom. Here we are sanitizing our workspace, cleaning up our tools, and preparing our next sculptural mushroom piece, not a cactus. The second piece that we are packing with colonized grain and substrate. Of course, we do exactly what we did with our first piece, Fairy Ring Portal. We cut out a piece of heat shrink plastic to put inside both mold shells, on top of which we put the internal frame inside of both mold shells. And let's not forget, we also have to make small incisions in the plastic on top wherever we build in the fresh air exchange ports. Wherever we make incisions in the plastic, we cover up with filter patches or micropore tape. Once the plastic has its holes for fresh air exchange and filter patches placed on top, we begin the process of inserting the frame on top and then packing the mold volume with substrate and colonized grain. Doing our best to pack the form as tightly as possible, mainly with more substrate than colonized grain, but still a fair amount of colonized grain so that it can colonize quickly. The greater the ratio of colonized grain to substrate, the faster it colonizes. Hoorah! We bloody well did it. Haha! Look at this. Look at this glorious piece. Wow. Magnificent. Fully wrapped and ready to colonize. Wait until you see this growing mushrooms from it. Not a cactus.
The next day.
My fellow humans, we're back in the shop. And look what we have here. A fully completed, beautiful iridescent pot for living crystal. Isn't that gorgeous? And I'm so happy it came out this time. It's almost like $20 to print this. So what are we gonna do right now? Oh yeah, I had another thing. Did it fail? No. And another thing that came out of the printers, half of our UFO piece. One of two mold shells for the UFO piece. So right now we're gonna aim to print the other half of this mold along with the internal frame. And if we have time, the beam stand that will sit beneath the UFO. Well, let's get right to it then. Bazinga. We get the UFO sliced up in the bamboo slicer. Then we bounce back into Fusion 360 to continue modeling the internal frame structure for our UFO piece, ensuring there is space for the fresh air exchange, and also add onto the internal frame so that it can have an internal rim to maintain the UFO form after it's fully colonized. It's been a great execution to include not just an internal frame structure, but also a form structure that preserves the shape of the intended form. Now with this internal frame for UFO, we're also including a connector part at the center point of the bottom so that after the form is fully colonized and begins pinning and fruiting, it can fit perfectly on top of the abduction beam display base. And that will complete the UFO living mushroom sculpture. With the frame done, we loaded up in the bamboo slicer and we printed.
Later.
Here we pop out a completed internal frame for our UFO piece, as well as the other mold shell.
A little longer than a few minutes later.
MycoSpace Trip family. Let me hit you with a quick update. We've got 6 designs fully modeled. 5 of those designs have been fully printed. The 6th design, being dubbed UFO, still needs a base printed, and it's gonna have a surprise element to it. You'll see soon. That means we still need to model 4 more designs. As of right now, we only have 2 of those designs packed with substrate and colonized grain. So now you're all caught up. We're gonna keep this momentum going, pushing this project forward with everything we've got. That concludes our episode this week. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them down below in the comments section. Again, thanks to all of you for showing such tremendous support for this channel and this series as a whole. I'm looking forward to showing you all the great progress we are making together. We have yet to see what the world will say, what the world will do once it sees the first ever living, breathing, sculptural mushroom grow kits, aka living mushroom sculptures. Stay tuned, another episode's coming up next week. Thank you so much for watching MycoSpace Trip Episode 5.